The 46th SADC Heads of State and Government Summit has placed regional integration, infrastructure development, trade, migration, and economic cooperation firmly on the agenda, with President Cyril Ramaphosa taking over as SADC Chair for the next year. But alongside these political and economic priorities, gender equality advocates are calling for the SADC Protocol on gender and development to be reviewed ahead of 2020, warning of growing resistance to women's rights and gender equality across the region. So, what should South Africa's SADC chairpersonship prioritize when it comes to migration, regional integration, and gender equality? And how can the region ensure that hard-won rights are protected and implemented? We are joined by Vearey, Associate Professor and Co-Director of the African Center for Migration and Society at Wits University, and Tabetha Kanengoni, Director of Programs at Gender Links, to unpack the key issues facing South Africa. Let me start off with Gender Links. I was doing a bit of reading around the SADC Protocol on gender and development. What I saw, main issues there were 50% representation of women in key decision-making roles. It was also the issue around economic empowerment of women in the region. I also saw the ending of violence, GBV, taking center stage in terms of the plans, as well as health and education promotion in terms of access and all of that. Looking back from when the protocol was established to today, particularly in view of the big meeting that we saw taking place at the Durban ICC, have we made progress at all?
Thank you very much for that important question. I think the SADC Protocol on Gender and Development is a very important instrument, which was developed in 2009 around very major issues around gender equality. Having seen that, SADC is not short of instruments, but issues around gender equality are usually sidelined, or they're treated as cross-cutting issues that then lead to them being sidelined, as if they're being mentioned in any instruments that we do have. If I may say, it is important to review the SADC Gender Protocol ahead of 2030, because 2030 is a major transition point, and the SDGs come to an end in 2030. So the SADC Protocol was supposed to last substantially, it was last updated in 2016. So it's been 10 years since the update of the protocol, and there have been quite a lot of activities and events that have taken place since then. It's not to say that the protocol hasn't been successful, but of course, because the protocol is a living and breathing document, it requires updating from time to time. So I think some of the issues that were discussed during this particular Heads of State Summit should tie in with Vision 2050, so that we keep aligned to the changes that we are seeing that are happening within the gender sector at the moment.
Let me go to Professor Vearey. Also, these are issues that generally can easily be linked to issues of migration, because you find women from the region coming to South Africa to try and find a better living, struggling to find schools for their children, struggling to survive, selling with their children on their back, and also, their rights not being adhered to in places of employment where they work and all of that. The issue of migration, though, was one of the core issues attended to in the 46th SADC meeting that we saw. To what extent did you see probably a pathway that speaks to finding a solution other than pointing fingers?
I think that the ways in which issues around migration were focused during the summit, there were sort of two main areas. One was obviously the current situation in South Africa, where we heard the president apologize on the behalf of South Africa for the ways in which foreign nationals are currently being treated in the country. And we know that many of the sort of behind the scenes conversations and the more informal and political conversations would have focused on that. And then obviously the second part is looking more broadly at the role that migration and well-managed and well-thought-through approaches to the management of migration and the benefits that that can bring to the region. Obviously, South Africa receives the largest number of SADC migrants within the region and has its own particular approach to the ways in which we should be exploring and responding to both movement, its management, and how to garner the benefits of migration. But we know that for other countries, there are other issues in the ways in which different kinds of challenges are either driving migration or are leading to people being forced to flee, conflict or other forms of challenge or disaster. And the ways in which we need to be thinking about the role of migration for regional integration, looking at the free movement protocol, I didn't hear much coming out that was about how this could be potentially operationalized, how to really look at, achieving the benefits that migration can bring for development in the region. I know that there is plans for a specific migration summit to be held, and I'm assuming that during that there will be attempts to develop, funding mechanisms to support particular strategies.
Let me go back to Tabetha. I mean, the challenges are enormous. I mean, the issue of GBV is an issue that is besieging, and I suppose it's also a global issue, but the fact of the matter is that in South Africa, we struggle with it in the region as well, even though some of the incidents we're told are not being exposed, being suppressed to a very large extent. Are you happy with how the region is handling this issue? If not, what do you think we should be doing as a matter of agency to start at least to be seen to be doing something about it?
I think the issue of GBV is one of many issues that are threatening women's rights, not just in South Africa, but in the region. When we look at the threats that we have within the region, I want to point out 6 interconnected threats. But perhaps the most worrying is that some of the rights we have, we thought were settled, are increasingly being contested. The first is the organized anti-rights and anti-gender backlash, which we're seeing not just in South Africa, but in the region and the world over. We're seeing movements challenging sexual and reproductive health and rights, bodily autonomy, comprehensive sexual education, protections against gender-based violence, and rights of marginalized communities. And these movements are increasingly organized, transnational, and very well-resourced. And the second is the shrinking civic space and democratic space. Gender commitments cannot be accountable if civil society organizations, women's rights organizations, journalists, activists, and women's human rights defenders cannot organize, speak freely, or scrutinize governments. The third is the conflict and insecurity that exists. Conflict increases gender-based violence, as we all know, displacement, trafficking, poverty, food security. And while women continue to be underrepresented in formal peace and reconstruction processes, then there's the issue of the climate crisis. There's droughts, there's floods, there's cyclones, and food and water insecurity continue to increase. Then we have economic instability, and then this new changing digital and AI environment that we are living in. So technology may provide enormous opportunities, but it's also enabling new forms of harassment, surveillance, impersonation, misinformation, and technology-facilitated gender-based violence. So our regional gender framework has not caught up to what that reality is, which is why we need to start talking about the revision of the protocol so that we can keep up with some of these new challenges that are coming up, which are more than just around gender-based violence, but there are many intersectional challenges that are coming up right now that we really need to resolve.
Professor Vearey, I'm sure you would agree with me that some of the ideas that came out of, or some of the discussions that took place, are not necessarily new ideas. Infrastructure development has always been discussed within the region. Economic integration has also been a topic that has been discussed at length, including the mineral resources in terms of processing the natural resources so that they are bought or they are sold as a finished product. But it seems as if when it comes to the implementation of it all, it is moving at a very slow pace. What is the cog in regards to the slow pace of development? I mean, certain countries are still struggling with IT in terms of communicating on borders as to, picking up the process that would have happened on the other side of Zimbabwe at Beit Bridge so that by the time you reach the other side of Beit Bridge in South Africa, officials would have known that you are coming and you are on the straight and narrow, among other issues. Even now, it's an issue that they're still trying to wiggle their way around. And there are many other issues as well. I mean, the building of dams becomes projects that go on for years with delays in between and all of that. It seems to me the issue is in the main always around the slow pace of implementation, or is it not?
I think there's a couple of issues. I think one is we've historically seen a focus on prioritizing ways to manage the movement of what's referred to as goods and services rather than ways to explore the free movement or the well-managed movement of people across the region. So I think that's where we see quite a big disconnect in what then is prioritized when the language around integration and industrialization comes into the play. We know that, with South Africa particularly, now hosting, chairing the SADC for the coming year is where those priorities are then driven from. We know in South Africa we've got a worrying approach to immigration and the management of migration, and how strongly that is directing many of the discussions happening across the region. So, for example, an increasingly restrictive approach to the management of immigration, which we know is also impacting individuals who move and their access to the rights to which they are entitled. This also comes into issues around social protection mechanisms and the ways in which people who work in one country, are they able to access any social benefits that they've accrued when they return to their country of origin. We know that we have this threat-based approach that is being sort of driven around migration using that language from South Africa, which is adopting a very worrying approach that is used, for example, in Europe and North America, that positions migration purely as a threat to national security, rather than positioning migration as a social reality and something that can be used for the benefit of all across the region. And I think that these are discussions and positions that are, at odds with each other. And so until we have at the regional level a more common approach, to a humane approach to exploring ways that we can better manage migration and allow people to access benefits from moving both, but we also see this as a challenge within countries, not only people moving between countries. And how do we ensure that that sort of free movement is really thought through in ways that all countries will be willing to come to the table?
Okay.
We know that for some countries, South Africa included, the language of free movement is associated with this idea that people would then so-called sort of flood into South Africa, which we know is not the case historically.
Yeah, unfortunately, guys, we've run out of time, but thank you so much, Chair, for your insights. Those were our guests there. Joe Vearey, Professor of Associate Professor at Wits, also co-director of the African Center for Migration and Society. Also, Tabetha Kanengoni, Director of Programs at Gender Links, unpacking key issues facing Southern Africa.